I think the reason why I didn't really have a desire and why I wasn't really susceptible to conspiracy theories is because I didn't have a desire to know what was going on in places that didn't concern me. You know what I mean? I think my work with journalism and independent journalism specifically was more so a desire to seek justice about all of the injustice in the world. Like I've always been someone who's just felt I've always had like very strong moral convictions in regards to like justice and people being treated fairly and things like that. And of course, like obviously being a Black woman and, you know, I do that in my line of work and how it pertains to me. You know what I mean? Like obviously there are a lot of injustices like in other people's communities and things like that. But I'm a Black woman and, you know, one thing I really, you know, I want to make this like very clear. And I guess I kind of pose the question of like, why is it that when it comes to Black women and Black people specifically, we always have to march on other people's behalf, you know? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't stand for other people. I mean, I understand that Black people are very influential, right? So I definitely think that we, you know, we may have some influence and we may be able to help liberate other minorities, right? Immigrants and people coming to America. But I think that's not really the intention behind why we have to be the sole motivators of everybody else's cause and everybody else's communal problems. Back to another pod. This is the Renaissance Room, and it's your girl Jane Leslie here, and I'm just coming on to just kind of share my thoughts. First, I want to say, you know, thanks for rocking with me. Anybody who's like following my pod and you're listening to the episodes, you know, and this is like a hobby for me, and I really enjoy it and expressing myself, like it's great. But in today's episode, I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about conspiracy theorists, right? Conspiracy theories has been on the rise. Like, I'm reading this article with APA.org, and it just talks about conspiracy theories. And I've always kind of had this question. I was actually going to buy and read the book Suspicious Minds, and it was like why people believe in conspiracy theories. But for myself, I realized that a lot of people believed in conspiracy theories because they were really they wanted knowledge, they wanted intelligence. And essentially what the psychologist talked about in this, I don't even think she's a psychologist, I actually think she's a sociologist. Let me see. Social psychology, and it's by Karen Douglas. And so I found this article to be very interesting. It just really kind of validates my own personal intuitive conclusions as to why people believe in conspiracy theories. And what I found is that people who believe in conspiracy theories, they have a desire for intelligence. They have a desire to know things about the world. It's a psychological need, right? And I found this to be, it just was like butter. You know what I mean? Like creme de la creme. Like it was like, it's really nice when you're able to validate your intuition, and you can couple that with insight, and you can find concrete evidence that validates that. And so I just thought that was like that was great. You know what I mean? I love when I have those breakthrough moments. But yeah, and that was something that was very evident to me. And so one thing that had always kind of been a continuum, and it's very linear, I feel like it's something that's very traceable, is that whenever there is a real life experience, right, things that are going on in the real world, there's always entertainment, right, on the back end that kind of comes in and distracts us and deters our attention from what's happening in the real world. And I'm not sure if I said this in the last podcast episode, but I believe in this so wholeheartedly. Like, if you've been listening to me, I'm pretty sure I said this. I may not have, but I really am so big on like being like, to me, what is real is what is in front of me. To me, what is real is my reality. To me, what is real is what's going on in the world around me. You know what I mean? And I think when you start talking about media literacy, I'm so grateful that I did have the semester in journalism when I studied journalism and just like ethics in regards to journalism, because, you know, it's so crazy. It's like we live in a world today where people are more willing to believe things that are posted on the shade room, right? News that is literally on the shade room, that is intended for entertainment purposes, that is, the stories are completely fabricated. You know what I mean? you're more willing to believe that than you are to believe something on CNN. And I remember growing up, it's so crazy. It's like I'm having a full circle moment right now, and not to really toot my own horn, but like I remember growing up and my grandmother would watch like CNN and NBC News and World News, and I didn't understand the dialogue. I didn't understand what they were saying, right? Like obviously they use a lot of I wouldn't even say that it's complex jargon, but it's very media literacy type based. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely a certain language that is used when you start talking about the news and how the stories are conferred, and you know what I mean, how it's explained to us, and the dialogue that goes on between the anchors and so forth. And I never understood it, but I knew that I wanted to be a person who understood it, because I felt like I had always kind of seen, my grandmother grew up watching the news. So to be honest, I kind of feel like I'm having a full circle moment. But I feel like she grew up watching the news. So I feel like for me, I wanted to be able to understand it. I wanted to be able to understand what it was that I was reading, what it was that I was seeing. And, I just think it's like a full circle moment for me, because I'm working so hard to understand it. And when I talk about working hard, I made this video on YouTube, and I was just saying, like, you have so many people today who want to be smart. You have a lot of people who want to have a certain level of intelligence, but they don't understand that takes work, right? Like if you want to develop your own ideas, your own philosophies, if you want to be someone who's intelligent, you're going to have to read books and do the work. You don't just get this by listening to podcasts, right? Like you have to engage, and you have to engage critically by questioning things, right? You have to ask the right questions. And I think your ability to ask the right questions is going to be confounded on your own insights, your own intuitions, developing that, and it's not to say that it's not something that can be developed, because I think a lot of people have misconceptions about intelligence. A lot of people think that it's something that you're born with. That I think that's why people forego the process of intelligence, right? And like actually developing their own ideals and, their own cognitive abilities. When I think about intelligence, first of all, we have to understand, like, as it pertains to race, because yes, this goes back to race. A lot of times intelligence is seen as something as like a white person, you know what I mean? But I think for me, I can't really stand on that, because the more and more I learn about myself, the more and more I learn about African Americans who've come before me, right? Those who've paved the way in education. I just feel like it's always been there, right? And we know that Black people have been the first in many things anyway. So, we're no longer believing those myths about our inferiority, right? But I really just feel like where we are today is so alarming. And it really breaks my heart. I feel like a lot of people will adopt conspiracy theories so that they don't really have to do the work in real life. You know what I mean? Like, I think conspiracy theories just kind of aids people in their fear, right? It necessitates that. It really nurses people in their fear so that they don't really have to go out and do anything and become anything. Or, it's not to say that you need to become anything, because, to be honest, having my hobby, right, like Renaissance Room, and just like where I'm at, like I'm so content. You know what I mean? Like I'm so content in that I don't want this to be a large platform. I'm not trying to interview everybody. Like I don't even, you know what I mean? Like I like doing this because it's just something that God puts on my heart to do. You know what I mean? Like, and I just like doing it. And it's like, that's literally it. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm sitting here, I'm reading all these books. You know what I mean? Like I have health. I'm able-bodied. Like I'm going to go out and do something in the world. Like I'm going to pursue my hobbies. I'm going to pursue my passions, and I'm going to, prayerfully, I'm speaking life, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm educating people, but it's like, that's it. I don't have no desire to be on that level, because there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with, you know what I mean? And I'm not intentionally trying to offend anybody. I pray to speak the truth in love, but it's like, it's a lot of stuff I just don't get with. And I feel like there's so much that comes with having a larger platform. Not ever saying that I will hold myself back, but what I am going to say is I'm going to take my time, and it's like, whatever God wants to do with my platforms, if God even wants to give me a platform, you know what I mean? Then that's what it'll be. But I'm not in any rush. I feel like there's so much that comes with notoriety. And I saw this a way back, like even with writers, when you start to reach a level of notoriety, the stories are no longer about you, right? The story is now, how can I write this to accommodate this person, this person, this person, this person? That's a lot of accommodations, to where the truth and the intentionality and the authenticity of the work is no longer there. It's completely erased. You know what I mean? So it's like, I have no desire to really be in that space. And I think one thing that really plagues me about this work, and like journalism and literature is that finding African Americans to educate those who actually need the education is very rare. You know what I mean? It's very rare to find people who really need to hear what I am saying and grow with me as I learn and I develop my vocabulary and so forth, like, and they can understand it. Those people are they're busy fighting. They're busy telling me that I'm wrong for, you know what I mean? That I'm this, and so it's just like, it's so much to unpack here. You know what I mean? It's so much to unpack here. But yeah, I just think it's so crazy. It's like, it's something that it's a continuous. It's very continuous. It's very linear. I think you can definitely trace it. You know what I mean? Like, you can very easily point to very historical moments that were made in history, right? In real time. Like, you know what I mean? History being yesterday, right? I'm talking about Claudine Gay. And you can very much trace that to, just like where we are today and like the media, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. I think that one thing that just concerns me about conspiracy theorists is like, it really blinds people to the truth a little bit, because I feel like in your attempt to seek the truth, you don't really find it because it's like somebody else's truth, you know? And I just think like when you start talking about entertainment, you start talking about famous people and the glorification that we give famous people, I don't understand it. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're all obsessed with it. You know what I mean? Like we are literally obsessed with it, like celebrity culture, the whole nine. Like we're so obsessed with it to the point where it's like what's real in our lives doesn't matter, right? Like even though we say we don't want to be famous, even though we say we don't want, X, Y, and Z, we spend our whole lives, right? Our entire days consuming famous people's lives, talking about famous people. Like people talk about it being a critical analysis and using celebrities as examples, but to me it's just more so like, why do we care? And so there was a point where I was kind of on the fence, right? I want to talk about this because I feel like this is like, very cohesive. I was on the fence about people debunking celebrities. I was like, okay, well, should we really be debunking celebrities, right? Like there's something about people living extraordinary lives that is very aspirational for children, right? In terms of like, having a desire to go out and do X, Y, and Z. And even though I understand that, real world careers, such as like being a veterinarian and, you know what I mean? All these different things are no longer a thing, right? Everybody wants to kind of be a YouTube star, which I will sidebar here and just say that we really kind of I'm going to say this to you because I think you need to hear this. YouTube is not a real job. It's not a real job. It's a hobby. You have your hobbies, okay? But you need to be in the work and you need to be in the world doing real things with your time and with the life that you have. You know what I mean? What really matters is what's in front of you, right? Content creation is not a real job. It's not a real job. And I think, for people who've done it, okay, maybe they'll give you a different perspective, but I'm going to just tell you right now, you're going to have a lot more peace, a lot more integrity, more than likely. And it's not to say you're not going to have integrity, but you're going to have a lot more peace in your life if you would just give your gifts to God, right? Have your hobbies, do the things that make you happy just because it makes you happy, just because you feel like, okay, I'm very authentic. I have something to say. I want to, help people in their perspective and shift their perspective around a certain thing, right? Do that. But in the real world, that's where you need to be spending your time. Like I think about that wave we kind of had where a lot of people were like, oh, I want to start a clothing brand or whatever. And thinking that it's like, it's going to take off and become the next, I don't know, like Gucci or something, right? And it's like, it's not to ever really kill a dream, but it's more so just to say like, that's a dream. You know what I mean? And like, yeah, sometimes dreams come true, but it's like a dream without a plan. It's not, you know what I mean? And then you start looking at real life and it's like, okay, what are you willing to give up for this dream? Are you willing to literally go and live in New York and be homeless for the next, 20 years? I'm being honest, until you're like 40 and then you're probably going to hit something. You know what I mean? Is that what you're willing to do? That's a lot of time wasted. And even still is no guarantees. And, when you're young, you will rebuttal that and say, oh, in life, there are no guarantees. You'll say that until you're in your 30s and like you have nothing established, right? But this idea, but this dream. And like the media has done a phenomenal job at taking, these stories of like the underdog and these stories of people who've went out and achieved their dreams. And it's like, one thing I've learned about a dream is that it's something that is so fabricated, right? Because one, the media, right? We know that there are so many stories, so many movies about people achieving their dreams, and they go off and they live this happy life, right? And they walk into the promised land, which we obviously know. Let me dial it back here. God's will is the best thing for your life. Like, that's the only thing that's ever even going to give you, like, you know what I mean? Like, anything like that, especially that doesn't bring you any sorrow. So like, that's just first things first. But one thing I've learned about a dream, when I was studying journalism, I had such a revelatory moment. And I was like, man, I've come all this way. I've done all this work. I'm doing all these things. I've come all this way. And it was like the curtain was lifted, and I was touring news stations, and I was like, man, this sucks. You know what I mean? Is this the path? Like, this sucks. And I remember sitting in my class, I was talking to my professor, and he said, yeah, well, when you become a journalist, you're not going to be able to have all those type of opinions. I said, well, what's the alternative? Because I'm not gonna, that's the truth. And it's funny because I had a friend who studied journalism. It was a colleague of mine that I had worked with, rather. And she was like, don't study journalism, because it's not anything like what you think it is. You think you're going to be telling the truth and you're going to be doing all these things, and it's not like that. And I was like, oh, she's just trying to, knock my dreams. I must be getting close, right? Like, I'm going to school, I'm studying journalism, and here she is telling me not to do it. You know what I mean? And it's like, you kind of have that childlike sense of naivete, which I think is good, right? Like, I'm not here to knock anybody from that. Like, I think you should have, that sense of belief within yourself that you can do it, and it may work for you. But I think one of the dangers of like building a brand or, pursuing a certain path and being so tunnel vision is that, one, you don't obviously allow God to come into that, like your entire creator who knows what your purpose is. But two, it's like, I'm telling you, man, it's something about getting what you want. And it's like, it sucks, it really sucks. And like, you think that it's like this amazing thing that's going to be this thing. And it's like, you get there and it's like, it's nothing like they make it out to be in the movies, because honestly, I think film has a very interesting way of being a very prominent representation in our lives. I think it's a huge reference that we always go back to when we look at things and we, try to figure things out, like even in love and dating and relationships, right? It's always been some type of media influence, in this case, film, right? So back to what I was saying about like, pursuing your dreams and like celebrity culture. I was saying, okay, maybe we shouldn't debunk celebrities. Or I was like, well, let's just think about this here, right? Like, what are we going to give kids, what are their aspirations going to be? So that was my first question. I'm like, I don't think we should do this because I think that it really kind of robs them of the ability to dream. And I think that's why they are so, hedonistic and, nihilistic in the sense that they don't believe anything. And it's like anything goes, and they're very suicidal and things like that because they don't have any hope. So I'm like, okay, is our debunking of celebrity culture robbing, the youth of opportunities to dream and to kind of have something to hope for? But now that I'm on the other side of this, I don't know. I think the reason why we debunk celebrity culture is because we are kind of at this place in society where celebrities actually take a lot from us, right? Like, I don't think that it's so much monetary, but I think at this point it's a matter of attention, right? So what social media did was really bridge the gap between celebrities and average regular, day-to-day people, which I wouldn't really say that people are average and regular in their day-to-day, because, one thing I found from pursuing my interests and my hobbies and really having a lot of, I wouldn't even say free time, because Lord knows I'm busy, but I make time, right, for the things that interest me, is there are some incredible people in the world doing incredible things. I found people who are on like ocean projects where they're cleaning up the ocean, and they're a part of, nonprofits that like go in and like clean up the ocean. That's really cool to me. And then I've seen people go and like scuba dive and find like some really incredible fish, and like God's like most beautiful work, I really believe, is like amongst the ocean and like these beautiful fish and so forth. And then there are people who are out in the world and it's like they can skate really well, like there are just some people who can do some really incredible things. So it's like I would never look at someone and say, oh my God, you're average, I can't be attached to you, you have nothing to say, your life is not interesting, it means nothing since you're not famous. I think that we have to to be very conscious in that revolt in our minds. In that renewal of our mindsets, especially as it relates to just, how we relate to one another, because celebrities absolutely do take a lot from us. So I think for a lot of people, we can look at it from a superficial standpoint and we'll compare it surface level, right? We don't know the celebrity, so we may say, yeah, celebrities do take a lot from us, like Eat the Rich, right? I think that was like the biggest thing. And obviously, I think Eat the Rich was more so concerted effort towards like billionaires who are, using a lot of the planet's resources to fuel their businesses. But I think that it was more so like people kind of take that same type of approach to celebrities. And, I think that what we can learn from a lot of celebrities who are coming out talking about their industries and how it's not so great is going back to that thing I was saying about the dream, right? Like, and how you really should give your life to God and like really allow God to help you with your purpose and his will for your life, because everything is smoke and mirrors, right? Like, and I think that is kind of like being in your 20s and coming out of that childlike wonder. And I think if you can get with God and come out of that childlike wonder and that sense of naivete of like chasing a dream and being in that tunnel vision and it being so linear, I think you'll get to happiness a lot further versus like getting into your 30s and being like super miserable and having like, like you're just kind of all over the place. Of course, everybody's path is different and, God can do it, for you. So it's not to say that it's too late if you are in your 30s, but I just think, if you can kind of grow out of that prior to, I think you'll be a lot happier with the fruit in your 30s. But again, it's not really a matter of age, right? Or like a time span. I'm just more so saying, I think for most people, as much as we like to revolt against social expectations about where we should be in terms of our age, I think that it really gives us, like measurable goals and measurable expectations. I do think you should be somewhere different at 25 versus 21. And I do think you should be somewhere different at 30 versus 25. I think our, dismissal of social expectations in terms of like age and normality is a little bit concerning, because I think that just, it's kind of like leaving everybody behind. And I don't think we should do that. But yeah, so I think the reason why we debunk celebrities, my phone's getting ready to die, so I'm going to have to wrap up this pod. But I think the reason why we debunk celebrities is because celebrities 100% take from us. And it's not in the ways in which we think, which is monetary, right? We can look and see, okay, yeah, this celebrity makes way more money than me. It's not that. I don't think that's the proxy that we're talking about. I think the proxy that we're robbed of is our attention, right? So instead of being in the real world, right? Instead of us discussing matters such as like Roxanne, oh my God, I keep saying Roxanne Gay. It's because I just bought her book Opinions. But instead of addressing real world issues, right? First Black woman at Harvard, Claudine Gay, we're discussing celebrities, right? We're talking about celebrities, and that is something that is a continuum that permeates our space. And it's always been that way. Instead of talking about things that are happening in the real world, instead of paying attention to those who are around us, whether it be the children, whether it be, our relatives, right? People who have children, cousins and uncles cousins, uncles, and so forth, right? Our elders are getting older. And most people listen to this pod, it's like, late 20s. So it's like, we have our elders, right? They're getting older. You may have nieces or nephews, right? It takes a village. You know what I mean? Like, instead of the people who need our attention, right? The kids in the community and so forth, who's getting our attention? It's celebrities. You know what I mean? So it's like, when you have that, I think that that's really deep down why we're debunking celebrity cultures, because it's all too consuming. It's become all too consuming. And I think it's always been that way. But I think we're at this place now where it's like, I think it's really bad. It's like at this point, I think we live it, breathe it, sleep it, and it's like what's in the real world, what's in front of us, people who, it's like that doesn't matter. And I think that is concerning. And I do think that at that point, that is, something that is worth debunking.